And just like that, 30 seconds later, here we are on a brand new live stream on the channel of the Long Box Punk. If you have found yourself here, welcome. If you've been here before, glad to have you back. I'm Chris. I'm known as the Punk here on the internet, and I am joined. Do you want me to call you C? Chris?
Whatever,
CE?
whatever works for you. I've been trying to separate my professional life from my personal life, because people
Got
on the
it.
internet are weird. And I
Yes.
just, I want to separate from the weird people. And there's professional myself, and there's personal self. And if it's on something like this, it's professional.
Perfect. Well, I've got CE joining me today. That's the right direction. Thanks for hanging out with me. I know we shifted things last second, but I'm glad that we were still able to connect and hang out. And I am looking forward to digging into the comic that you've got coming out. So welcome aboard, man.
To be here. Happy that you're able to shift it because for whatever reason, even though I live by Google Calendar, somehow I got my wires crossed on dates and times. And I know I'm happy to talk and very appreciative that you're able to move it. I'm very happy to talk about the book, comics, anything you have on your mind. I'm sure I have an answer for.
Perfect. I have extra grace when other people do what I normally do, which is over like double, triple book myself because I too live and die by my Google Calendar.
Yep,
So
yep.
totally get it. And so as soon as you said that, I was like, oh yeah, no problem. Like, got it. I understand. I have been there just this past week, like twice. So no worries, man. So this is a comic book podcast show, stream, YouTube thing, whatever we want to call it. So I have to start with your origin story. So like, how did you get into comics? How did you start creating comics? Like, where does all this start for you?
I mean, as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to write comics. I always wanted to be involved in comics. I didn't quite know when I was younger how that worked or like what that
Mm.
meant. Like it just seemed as a kid like, oh, you have to be super famous and that's how you make comics. And just to click that, well, they were regular people too at one point. They did some work and then they got to that point.
Yeah.
But pre-internet, back in the ye old 90s, like there wasn't a lot of like the write your comic books. And if you want to go further back, there wasn't anything in the 80s and 70s. I mean, I have the comics the Marvel Way by Stan Lee. I got that when I was probably like 7 or 8. That was
Mm-hmm.
like at least that I can remember as far as like bookshelf getting into comics, like the only thing that was out there.
Mm.
So what got me into it was I was again a 90s kid. Saturday morning cartoons on Fox Kids, WB
Yep.
Kids. I'm pretty sure there's one other like channel that was out there that I'm forgetting. But, the animated Spider-Man, animated X-Men, animated Batman, Batman Beyond, Spider-Man Unlimited. Like I can name off one of my favorite ones is even a comic related, but it's Beast Wars. I've got the Maximal
Mm.
sign on my left calf, so I got that tattooed. That was my favorite toys, favorite TV show. So it's a plug for anyone in the future. I've been trying to get on the Beast Wars for a while. I actually had a connection at IDW. I pitched, and they said we're not doing anything with them. And I got real pissed off that like a few years later, like the movies were coming out, and suddenly they're doing Beast Wars, and it should have been mine. But anyway, so yeah,
Yeah.
comics always wanted to do it, and a big anime person and manga. Dragon Ball Z. If I had to put like one of my top three, five, probably three properties that not only influenced me but like made me want to do the visual medium, it was Dragon
Yeah.
Ball Z. I've got notebooks and stuff of drawing Dragon Ball Z characters. If I wasn't drawing Spider-Man characters in fifth grade, one of my friends was actually selling off my artwork to other kids for like $20, and I'm pretty sure we made like 2 sales, and I have no idea why. Not that it was terrible, but like, why are you buying $20 notebook artwork from a kid? But
Right.
that's how I got started. I remember one of my friends now who's a lawyer. He came in for like show and tell or something with like Daredevil comics, and I was like, "That's awesome! I need to get these too." I think
Mm-hmm.
the only comic I had at that time was like a Transformers comic, and maybe like a Spider-Man comic because my grandparents owned a video store at the time, and I'm pretty sure it was like a promotional thing they had. And when I went visited the store, I think they had like a stack and it was free, so I took one. But seeing him with the Daredevil comics, and it was Plastic Man too. He's a big Plastic Man and Daredevil fan.
Mm.
I have no idea where he got into Plastic Man, but like he had Plastic Man comics, and I was like, these are awesome. I want to get these,
Yeah.
and that really pushed me to start going to a local shop in my town. I actually went to a comic convention and won like $200 or $300. They gave me little poker chips, and I would just go to the booth, and I guess they got paid back from the convention. But the
Sure.
conventions then, whole lot different different than they are now. It was, if anyone's seen It's Always Sunny, there's the Holiday Inn special where they're trying to get into the Philadelphia stadiums from this one hotel. Well, that hotel did exist. It's no longer there. The Xfinity Center is there now. But that hotel is the one that I did a comic convention in, and it was like this small corner of the hotel, like a conference area. Like there was
Yeah.
maybe like 10, 12-ish tables. There was no cosplay, there was no entertainment, there was no like big flair. It was guys who were old, they were angry, and they sat there. They didn't look up at you, and they only paid attention to you when you were handing them a comic with money and being like, "I want to buy this." So
Yep.
those are some of my earliest comics experiences. But again, I didn't know how to get into it. I love my parents, but like every parent, they're like, what are you going to do with your life that's going to pay the bills? So when I was
Yeah.
going to college, my first majors were history. I was a history teacher was like the backup, and philosophy and religious studies. Because what I really want to do was I wanted to professionally fight, and I kind of modeled or wanted to model myself off. If anyone's familiar with Bully Beatdown, Mayhem Miller. Mayhem
Mm.
Miller was one of my favorite fighters of all time. Not only just his charisma and the way he could talk, but he was eloquent. In MMA, there can be some very talented fighters, but a lot of times they're as interesting as paint. And
Yep.
Mayhem Miller was like just this bigger than life personality. He was on Bully Beatdown. He's cracking jokes. He was over the top, this and that. He got some movie deals, and I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I think is the way to do it. So I wanted to professionally fight. I've been doing martial arts all my life. So I was like, I'm going to follow that path. I'm going to be Mayhem Miller or the second Mayhem Miller. And I'm going to use that to somehow pivot into creatively writing comics, which is the thing that like is my passion. I've got these stories in my head that I want to tell. That's the direction. It did not pan out that way. I got hurt, gym closed, bunch of things happened, and some stupid personal life choices where I didn't put my heart into it at the time the way that I should
Yeah.
have. There was opportunities and there was fights and stuff that I just didn't take, and a lot of just dumb life stuff. Still doing martial arts, still doing jujitsu. I actually co-own a school, so like it's been a part of my life, but the professional aspect did not go in that direction. However, it did allow me to pivot because I'd say in like 2009, 2010, MMA was kind of hitting its small little baby peak. And you also had a lot of like blogs and stuff that were getting big. Like Bleachers Report now is one of the biggest sports
Yeah.
sites on the internet right now. At the time, you could literally just submit any person. You just had to have an account, submit an article to Bleachers Report, and it will get posted. And that's what
Yep.
I did. I posted like Fedor Emelianenko is like the top fighter of all time, or pound per pound, or something like that. And that was my first article. And then I started writing for a wrestling blog called Hit the Ropes, and I started the Hit the Ropes MMA. And that writing portion, knowing like, hey, I'm doing this sport, you know, I've got a little bit of insight. I've got, an opinion, and I thought my opinion was the all-time thing. Like probably every creative writer person, like I know what I'm talking about. I know more than you, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I used that to then change my major in college from uh, history to journalism, and it kind of like my dad did a little bit of sports journalism in college, so he was like, "Oh, I wrote for my school paper. We happen to go to the same college. I ended up writing for the same paper that or school paper that he wrote for." So it kind
That's
of like
cool.
checked that box for him, like okay, well, you're saying you want to write or creatively write, but you have this like legitimate fallback in journalism of, lots of different things, magazines, journal, whatever
Yeah.
that you can get in through journalism. Filled that hole. Why then use that journalism to then pivot to we'll call it comics journalism or comics writing? I know Newsarama recently closed. Luckily, Bleeding Cool still exists, but there was a
Yep.
whole lot bigger of a presence. We'll say between like 2015 and 2010, as far as internet comic, or even earlier, like 2005, internet comic presence. So I started pitching to those sites, trying to write for them. Ain't It Cool News, if anyone knows Ain't It Cool News,
Yeah.
old school site, nice little parody from Kevin Smith on Jay and Silent Bob. I understand they have a different kind of, depending on who you are, like people have different opinions on them. But I use them to again pivot. I would talk to creators. I got to talk to Scott Snyder, a bunch of different people. I got to go to conventions, and I use that. And every time that I was creating content, whatever I was writing for, to then always ask like, what do you do to break in? What are the
Mm.
secrets? What are like, how do you make the sauce? How do you make the sausage? And generally it was always the same. It was like, quote unquote, make comics. Some were a little more in depth, but really it just came down to make comics. But I took all those networking opportunities, I took all of that information, I read the books, I did the things, and that's really what helped pivot me into doing comics. I did my
Mm.
first creator-owned comic, The Six Swords, back in 2015, 2016, off of an idea from a friend who made a drunk Facebook post about kind of our friend group in the apocalypse. I was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. So me and two other friends developed the idea. We wrote the comic. We had two successful Kickstarters, and that was my first comic book, and that's how I got in. Like I said, I used that networking opportunity through the comic sites to meet, talk to people, everything under the sun. That's how I met Dirk Manning. That's how I learned about SourcePoint. I even pitched the Six Swords to SourcePoint, which at the time got denied. So not all the books that I've gone through SourcePoint have said yes. It was years ago, but and I met Dirk, and because of my relationship with Dirk back in 2014, 15, he actually posted in his kind of like he's got like a creator, or not a creator group, it's like a fan group for like all of
Mm.
his work and all of his people. He posted an interview from 2015 or 16 that we did, which is now 10, 11 years old,
That's
for
awesome.
his series Mr. Ree, and it was volume 2. Now I've got the book here. I just got it from the Kickstarter. He's either on volume 6 or volume 8, so I don't want to misspeak, but I'm going to look real quick. So that was volume 2. He's on volume 6.
That's awesome.
So that's how long these relationships and these networkings kind of last, and how long that I've wanted to write comics. I've had a lot of hiccups, a lot of like falling on my face flat. Spent a lot of money on the first Six Swords book, and it just didn't work out. But it took a while to recoup that fund and start writing again. I even tried a literary agent route. Um, that went a few years. It just didn't work out. I had a children's book through that literary agent. I was hoping to get picked up with the artist from Rick and Morty, Fred
Mm.
Stressing, who's an amazing artist. We have got like 8 pages done, ready for pitch, a beautiful pitch package. Like I said, the literary agent thing didn't work out. So as far as my origin story, it's been a very long road, and I don't even consider myself like on the stairs or on the road. Like I've now officially, with this book with SourcePoint, I can now say I've placed my foot onto the road. Now I got to see where that road actually takes me. Like I feel like now it's like, okay, I'm actually in the water at this point. Everything prior was a lot of prepping and a lot of training.
Mm. That's a good, I think that's a healthy way to look at it too, of like, I have gone through all of these things and all of these steps and learned something from all of it. And also like, it's only led me to here to be able to do that thing that's in front
Yep.
of me and then tackle this next thing. And instead of being discouraged with those pitches that didn't go well, like those are the I think it's fascinating that you mentioned that you pitched to SourcePoint, they said no, and now here you are in 2026,
Yeah.
like with a book being released as one as part of like the relaunch really of SourcePoint, and it's
Yeah.
that feels like a full circle thing. Like, was when you did you approach them again? Like, did you approach Dirk specifically of like, hey, I've got this book. I want to, I still want to be with SourcePoint. Like, how did that happen?
Interesting too. It's 100% full circle. When I was going to those conventions at the time with my book, The Six Swords, and we had a single issue and like a volume, and going and again trying to learn comics, like how do you do a con scene, how all these things.
Yeah.
I because I had the relationship with Dirk from doing interviews, and it kind of progressed from professional, to professional kind of friendly, and friends, or whatever you want to call it, to something more personal. That's how I met SourcePoint, because he started writing books for them, and I would see them at conventions, and I'd go to talk to Dirk, and then he would be with the SourcePoint guys. So I'd meet the SourcePoint guys, and talk to them. And I was like, oh, these guys are awesome. Like my goal is to have a book. Like if I had to meet companies and people, like sometimes not that people rub you the wrong way, but it's like these guys are really genuine. They're very down to earth. They're
Yeah.
awesome. They seem really cool. They've got good content, all that kind of stuff. I want to get something with them. Again, pitch of Six Swords. It was a no. Life happens. And I don't say that like it's nothing. I've pitched a lot of things. I've put in a lot of work with a lot of things behind the scenes that most of the time I'm sure all creators go through that people don't know about, and you get told no. I met IDW editor who's no longer, unfortunately, he was one of the cuts when IDW was doing their big
Mm.
cuts.
Yeah.
Who Chase, who I kept in contact for years, who I met at New York Comic Con in like 2016 or 17, and I would show my work or I'd give ideas. That was the Beast Wars thing, and at the time he's like, hey, we don't have anything. And Mad Cape, I pitched them some stuff. They
Yeah.
said no, and I met an editor at New York Comic Con in 2024. And it was just like, hey, this isn't right for us, or this isn't our style. So I've gone through a lot. There's a lot of books that I have. This is the unfortunate part, and I apologize. It's a little bit of a long, rambly answer to come
No,
back
it's good.
to another full circle moment. But like I had a lot of books too, even before I did the literary agent thing of like I've got 10 or 11 pages of a story idea, lettered and written, but the artist ghosted me.
Mm,
So I can't recoup that money. So there was like a lot of those moments where, and in this particular book, the first artist he did a page and then he had some health issues and dropped. Now he's doing art for Marvel. I missed the boat on that one. That really sucks. The next artist I got, he did a bunch of pages. Like I said, 11, 12, 13, 14, something like that. We got him lettered. Then he went completely missing off the face of the earth. And I know I'm not the only one. Like he is unfindable by anyone. I can't use those pages and get a new artist because then it's going to look weird for someone to take over in the middle of a book. So
yeah.
moments like that, like I said, I have a children's book. It looks beautiful. Fred did an amazing job. He does the Rick and Morty books for Oni. Yeah, Oni. Or they're Oni Press now. I know they got bought up and their name might have changed, but
Yeah.
does the Rick and Morty books amazing. We had a literary agent for a few years. There's a lot of behind the scenes things for it. That didn't work out, and just the constant failure or not the happy moments hasn't deterred me because it's truly something I want to do. So full circling it back to the source point thing, I was like, hey, I've learned all these lessons over the last 10 years. I consider essentially from like 2019 to the beginning of 2026 my like anime growth moment where like you go from a teenager to a man and you've done all this training and you come back and you're jacked kind of moment.
Yeah.
That's what I consider like this as far as my career thus far. I used all that time to write scripts. I worked very closely on a lot of different ideas with Drina Joe, who's done a lot of books for SourcePoint. She's editor for a lot of Dirk's books, for a lot of the SourcePoint books, and some other behind the scenes ghostwriting stuff that she doesn't like to tell anyone. She's done a lot of creative work that she should get praised for it. I'm saying it. She should get praised for it, but she doesn't want it. She doesn't want her name out there. But she's an amazing editor. So I worked with her for probably like 5 years on different books, on different scripts, on different ideas, developing things. Again, met her through Dirk as her editor, interviewing her and getting to know her. Um, we kind of I kind of decided, hey, I've learned these lessons. I'm not going backwards. I'm not going to do what I did with the Six Swords and put all this money into a book that went
Yeah.
nowhere because the Six Swords thing at the time, I met a publisher at Comic Con through comics journalism. I was like, hey, I ended up pitching to him. He's like, oh, I really like that idea. Let me see some art. We did the Six Swords. That publisher was attached to a graphic novel by Terry Crews. We went to San
Mm,
Diego Comic Con after we first published or first funded our Kickstarter, you know, because Terry had a panel there, but publisher he couldn't make it. He had some issue, and Terry canceled the panel, and that was like the last of anything that went on with that company. So I poured all this
mm,
money into, or not just me, I had other writers, but we basically paid up to like issue 4, and I paid for issue 4 myself to get this book created because we're like, we're gonna ride the coattails. This is attached to something with Terry Crews. Like whether we're good or not, it's gonna get eyeballs on our stuff, and we'll make money back. Didn't happen. So for this book upcoming, I was like, I am not going to do this again. I did another book, had some pitch pages. It didn't get picked up by Mad Cave. I was like, I am not wasting money. I've got a family. I've got bills. I've got a mortgage. I have to
yeah.
be very precise, very like surgical, and very intelligent, and take all the lessons that I've learned, all the advice that I've been told by other creators that I might have put out of my head because I thought I could be different. Like, all we'll call it youth or naivete. We do. It is what it
Yeah.
is. Until you fall on your face, you don't learn. Um, I took all of that and I'm like, I'm going to do this right. So I was actually looking for an artist for a completely different project. I put out the Reddit post, the Facebook post, like, hey, I need an artist, X amount of pages, this, that, and the other thing. Martin Jimenez, who's the book of the Mafia versus the Klan, he reached out to me. And I instantly, when I saw his art, I was like, you're not right for this project, but I know what you are. And that from there, I was like, I'm going all in on the Mafia thing. Like, this is the book we're going to do. This is the artist. I'm not losing him. He fits all the boxes that I need. So we started
Yeah.
working on it. And my original plan was I'm going to do this as a single issue, Kickstarter, recoup the money. Single issue, recoup the money. Single issue, recoup the money. I had
Yep.
already started mentioning it to Dirk. Drina, as his editor, already started mentioning it to Dirk, like, in his ear, like, hey, this is good. This is legitimate, whatever you want to call it. So he was aware of it, but the big thing was and this is when he kind of officially took, he was in the process of becoming the publisher of Source Point before he officially did. It was like, hey, we're only looking for graphic novels, no single issues, graphic
Yep.
novels. And in my head, I'm like, I'm not putting the money out front. Like, I just don't want to put myself in that position financially again. It's not worth it, whatever. I'm gonna do the single issues, Kickstarter, and then a few years I'll be patient. Like, I'm chomping at the bit. Like, I want to submit this to everyone. Like, I'm a
Yeah.
competitive person. I'm ready to go. I think this is a great idea. Like, I've got to get it out there. And I said no. I took that experience and I was like, I am going to do this correctly. I'm going to do it smart. I am not going to jump the gun. So I started putting out art, started doing a little bit of like marketing and publishing on my Substack, my Instagram, those kind of things.
Yep.
And Dirk started seeing the art, and he reached out to me and he was like, "Hey, when do you think you can get that book done by?" I was like, "Well, that depends on the question." And then we started talking. He's like, "Look, the conversation proceeded. The idea looks great. I think Josh would really go for it. The art looks fantastic. I think just timing of things going on in the world, things going on all over, that I can do really well. Can you do this in a graphic novel form?" He was like, "Unfortunately, we're not doing the floppies. It just doesn't make financial sense for an indie publisher to do the floppies. If
Yeah.
you can get it within a graphic novel and get it in a pitch," he's like, I think it'll get greenlit. I think it'll get greenlit." I talked to my wife. I will say some divine providence kind of moments happened to make me feel comfortable doing it, and even my wife feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, "Oh, I'm all in. Put it in." They said yes, and that's kind of how I got it in. But that 100% stems from the fact I've known Dirk for 10 years, but I've also known Josh for like 5 or 6 years, and going to conventions, saying hi, and the fact that he's seen me. And this is the same
Yeah.
face and the same guy who, maybe they said no 8, 9, whatever years ago to that one book. But the fact that I'm still around, the fact that I've still been doing stuff is like, okay, we can trust this is going to get done. Not
Yep.
only, again, not to like kind of toot my own horn thing, like, if you hear the Mafia versus KKK and that's not like, holy crap, what is this? Like, I'm interested in this. Like,
Yeah.
like that alone sells the book. But the fact that I've stuck around, I put in the work, I put in the time, like for a publisher, especially one trying to revamp, I think that helped them get confidence. Like, okay, this is an idea we like. This is an idea we feel like we can market and put out on the
Yep.
shelf. But we also know as a creator, he's not brand new. He's got some experience. He's been doing this for a while. And we can, again, trust him, which I think the networking aspect, I know not everyone likes to hear it, but you know, we are people who like who we know, and we also trust people we know.
Yep.
So it is who you know, and I personally don't feel like it's in a nepotism way. It's more like, hey, you could be a superstar, but I got to get to know you a little bit too, because I'm putting my money out there for you as a publisher, and
Yeah.
everything else. And funny enough, I've already gotten a second book and second title signed by Source Point. That once this launches and gets published, the Mafia vs. Klan, this will be the next book that I work on. That will come out under Source Point as well, which is BPRD, kind of meets, if anyone's familiar with it, the anime Soul Eater. So
Okay.
it's a supernatural book, kind of aimed at teens. I love Soul Eater. I love that anime, that manga a whole lot, and this is kind of my heavily influenced version of that. But like I said, I'm already on the second one getting signed. Already have some art done for it. I just gotta wait for the Mafia vs. Clan to kind of conclude.
Yeah.
Kickstarter kicking my butt a little bit. So that'll be the next focus for next year's the second book. So that's the full circle moment. It is, and it's funny that I have to tell the story. How I met
Yeah.
Dirk was also a moment of what I like to call divine providence, because it was my first Comic Con. I was there for Ain't It Cool News. I was there for new junkets and all the other fun stuff there, and I was also going to I went to a couple panels about comics writing or comics creation. I happened to go to one. Dirk was like the comics creator. He was like a special guest they brought in. At the end of his little thing, he's like,
Okay.
"Hey, I've got this book, Right or Wrong, about writing comics. Come to my booth after, to everyone in who was in the whatever the panel. Come purchase it. I think it will help you guys X, Y, and Z."
Mm.
So I go over to the table. I had all the intention to purchase the book and bounce, be gone, never see him again. I'm buying the book. He's like, "Hey, I see you got a press badge. Who are you here for?" Again, Ain't It Cool News, depending on the person. If they know who they are, they've got some very good or very bad opinions on them. So I was like, I don't
Yeah.
want to start that conversation. was like, oh no, I'm here with Ain't It Cool News, and I'm trying to like scurry off. He's like, I used to write for Ain't It Cool News. I was like, really? Yeah. And we started talking, and it was like, what are you going to school for? Journalism. Dirk's like, I went to school for journalism. And then somehow we got started talking, and he was like, I am also a martial artist. And like this whole checkbox of things, of similarities, at a moment where I was going to leave. Like I said, I was going to buy the book and go. That has
Yeah.
spawned into this 10+ year relationship, which is now, because I had that relationship, it's grown, has allowed me, or gave me the door opening, or at least someone who's like, hey, I know you, I know your history, all this kind of stuff, to
Yeah.
even listen to my pitch, and then again accept the pitch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the big full circle moment of how it went from being told no to being told yes, and already being told for a second yes.
That's insane, dude. Like that's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that almost feels like one of the stories that you hear as someone that would go to a panel and you're on the panel and you tell that story and people are
yeah.
like, you're just making that up for the con. Like there's no way
I'm
that's
like,
real.
no,
But it's, I mean, having talked to as many creators as I have and having been the guy that goes to
yeah,
cons and just becomes friends with people at the
yeah,
con as I'm talking to them, it's like, no, that's
exactly
absolutely
how it happens.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's how, I mean, that's how I became a collaborator with one of the guys that I've worked with now. Like we just met at a convention and immediately hit it off. And then fast forward 8 months and like we had a story together in an anthology. And it's just like, that's exactly how that happens. And it just reinforces the fact that while you might want to make comics and you think that writing or drawing the comic is all you got to do, like the networking and the marketing and the getting in front of people and the talking with people and the learning how to pitch your story and your book to people on a whim, like, oh, I'm here and you're paying attention, hey, I have a comic, can I tell you
yep.
about it? And like you never know how that's going to turn out. And so I love that that's your story. Like that's insane.
You never know how it's
um
going to turn out. You never know who you're going to meet. That's why this is a little bit of a Dirkism. You should always be professional. You should always, however you're
yeah,
carrying yourself. Comics is such, like, people think on the outside, like before I started actually talking to people, oh, it's a huge pond. It's really not. Like, it's very small. When you start talking to creators
yep,
at any level, it's usually, even if they're at the lower level and like, let's say they've got smaller indie comics, they still know at least someone of another person who knows someone who is bigger. There's always like that 6 degrees of separation
oh yeah.
from everyone within comics. It's wild.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun that I'm now learning starting to table cons as a
Yeah.
creator is like it really is, like I would always be like, oh, all these people ended up together and like they're all friends. That's awesome. And it's like, no, they just are sitting together at a con. So like they set
Yep.
up their booths next to each other. Like, yeah, it's way more interconnected than anybody that has done it knows. And the ones that have done it, they're like, yeah, no, that's just how it
Mhm.
goes. You just talk
Think-
to the people because what else are you gonna do when there's a lull in the attendance at a
Yeah,
con or
hours
whatever?
and
Like
hours and hours.
I didn't want to be that pessimistic, but like, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I mean a good way. Like you're there for hours and hours and hours. You can either be
yeah,
miserable, but you're kind of like you're in that small group. I think a lot of times, because it gets associated with like the film industry, which is very obviously agent centric, and like I've got to go to LA or I've got to go to New
yep,
York, and I have to bust tables until my script gets read. Comics,
yep,
they just automatically assume is the same. It's like, no, go pay an artist or be an artist who gets paid by a writer. Go make the thing, go sit at a table a couple times, and I guarantee you'll meet someone and just start the little stepping stone pigeon,
yep.
whatever you want to call it, of connection.
Yeah, because then it's like, well, hey, I've got this other show coming up in like 3 months. You should come table at it too. Like we can split the
Yeah,
table,
yeah,
whatever. And then suddenly, like you start doing events with other people just because they're cool to be around and hang out with.
yep,
And then suddenly you're like spending all weekend with them, and you like
yep.
all of those experiences, which then only make making comics even cooler because it's like,
Oh,
oh,
it's great.
you lost your ass on this book too. Sweet. All right.
Yep.
It's the like the communal aspect of finding success in indie comics, specifically, like cannot be understated or
No.
overstated enough for whatever the you know, try like it can't be reinforced enough of just like it. Yes, you can make a comic, especially if you're a solo cartoonist and you can do the writing and the artwork. I am jealous and I will forever be
You're a
jealous of you.
unicorn and you're a jerk.
And also like save some of the magic for the rest of us.
Yeah, yeah,
But also like even if you are that, right? You still have to rely on other people. It still takes a community to network and get connections made and figure out who has the best deal on a printer because they know a guy. And like, how do you, oh, I can get you, you know, visibility on this social media because I know this person and they've got
yep,
like a bajillion followers or whatever. It's like, sweet. I just need eyes on my project. Like, that's all I need. And then someone will pick it up and then someone will get interested. And then suddenly I'm growing my audience. And it really is like, it's all about who you know. And so I love that all of that is central to your entire story, specifically the source point. And, you know, just the stick to itiveness of like, don't give up, kid. Like, keep going. Take the no, learn
yep,
from it,
keep going.
fail forward, keep going. Like, you have to keep going or it's going to eat you. Like, you're just going to get eaten alive. And so, like, my background is all in broadcasting. And so I
Yep,
would do like voiceover auditions and I would do like, let me submit my tape for this and try and get an on air position here. And it was a whole hell of a lot of no's. And it was always like, well, what can I do better? Like I would get the rejection email or letter or call or whatever. And it was always like, okay, how could I have done better? Like you have to be able to learn
yeah,
from your experiences and take that forward or else you're never going to like get better because you're just doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. Like what? So fast forwarding, then you now have this story that's launching on Kickstarter in September called Mafia versus the Klan. Wow, I want to hear about this story. I want to hear about how it's based on like real life stuff that your grandfather experienced. Like, give me all of the, give me all the things about
yeah.
the mafia and the Klan.
And one thing I want to say to the last topic, which is really important, because the community's so small, if you're a jerk and you
Oh
suck,
yeah.
everyone's gonna know. Like that's like because
Oh
it's so
yeah.
small. Like if you're a pain to work with, or people don't like you, it's gonna spread and it's gonna
Yep.
get to other people, and you're gonna be known as that guy. So if you're looking to break into comics, always be professional, always be friendly. You will get a reputation. You know, even if it's small, but it will build. So we make sure you're on your P's and Q's. Just don't be a jerk. But
Yeah.
to the Mafia versus Clan, yeah, it's been a process. It started off as my dad was watching a military channel episode called The Mafia versus the KKK. And I remember him like he watched it and he mentioned in passing like that would be a really cool idea for a comic book. I was like, yeah, it would. It just kind of got the gears turning. So I ended up watching the episode, and one of the things that stood out to me that I just thought was interesting as a premise, you know, obviously you've got a lot of mafia stories, the gang stories, the Scorseses,
Yeah.
the you know the Donnie Brasco's, the whatever, the Goodfellas, you know, Scarface. It's this whole genre, but it's always like the criminal aspect.
Yep.
Well, in the actual history, like the military channel stuff that was covering, it took an interesting dynamic. Like obviously, like the KKK, black and white, bad guys, evil, whatever you want to call it. They're like the easy niche. But you also kind of add in the cultural dynamic of these were the people in the U.S. who, you know, they didn't like immigration, they didn't like all the ethnic change, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they were also really big on prohibition. They were
Mm.
also really big as a group of Protestants. Now, not all denominations, but like a subset of we'll just call it Protestant, you know, anti-immigrant and no alcohol. So
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. The mafia coming in was ethnic, so you're Italian immigrants coming in, pro alcohol, and they were Catholic.
Yep.
So there was this interesting dynamic in the actual history episode. Not to like, I'm saying this because I've got to like put something. I am not saying the mafia is progressive in any way. However, in the way that like the speakeasies ran, or the way that they kind of integrated themselves, like think Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack. That was a multiracial group of music people, which was different. Jewish
Yeah.
Americans, African Americans, you know, and then the Italian Americans. Well, now you mix that and how the speakeasies kind of work of those same kind of like Boardwalk Empire, great example of Atlantic City where you had the African American musicians or the Jewish Americans involvement and the Italian Americans, and they're all in this area. You also had white women dancing and being kind of, again, not like they were on level with men, but you start adding in like the suffrage movement at the same time. There was like this, we'll call it multicultural or like multi-ethnic, whatever you want to call it, element to the mafia that was created against the Klan. They're also the ones who are selling the alcohol, which the Klan is trying to ban. So there was just this interesting, like, hey, you can take this gray element and you can make it fight a black element, and that's a cool like story idea. So I
Yeah.
built a 5-page script off of that idea, 5 pages, you know, and I did it in the Comics Experience Intro to Writing course in about 2017, 18-ish, with
Okay.
Andy Schmidt, who's now the I believe he's the editor in chief at Boom now. Because I
Hmm.
emailed him a couple weeks ago. He was a huge help at this period of time. Very big creative help, very great directional help. I did a lot of like mentorship kind of things with him at the time.
Cool.
But I did that in his class for a 5-pager. That then developed later on outside. I was like, I want to make this like a graphic novel. Now, I knew there were some stories about my grandfather in the past. Some of them I knew, and some of them I ended up learning later, which has then developed the story even further. One of the big ones was when my dad was younger. Um, my grandfather had a restaurant in Chesapeake, Virginia, and it was boycotted by the KKK. That was like one of the big things. My aunt, who's no longer with us, she wasn't allowed to get like National Honor Society or something like that because she was Italian American. And talking to my
Oh,
dad
wow.
and trying to get more information on that, um, he can't remember a whole lot. He was like 5 or 6, and he's like, if anything else besides these big events that my dad told me about happened, I don't really remember because I was a kid, and if people said things or did things, like I don't really remember. There were some other elements too that my grandfather would talk about with my dad as well, of how the local kind of, again, think Virginia in the 60s, below Mason-Dixon line. My grandfather, an Italian, he's eating with his African American cooks. He's driving them back and forth to work. He's kind of hanging out with them. He's shooting the breeze. He's whatever. That was not going well with a place that already picketed his restaurant. So you can kind of understand like the
Yeah.
dynamics going on. The only real incident that my dad can personally remember is he describes it as like this big country stereotype guy with like his overalls up to his nipples, came in and more or less told my grandfather to get out of town, and my grandfather in so many words told him to screw off. That's like the only thing that my dad can really remember from that period. So I
Mm.
took that, I integrated it into the story. I'm trying to develop it, but the big thing that really took this story to the next level was I always knew that my grandfather had a sister and that she was murdered. However, he never spoke about it. The only information that was passed down was via my grandma, who knew the story. It was really vague. We didn't know the details. It was either a lover or a stalker shot and killed her, but we were never sure were they trying to shoot my great grandmother Felicia because they were mad at her because she was saying no, like
Yeah.
what was it directed at my aunt, my great aunt? Did he mean to shoot my grandfather who pissed? We just weren't sure. We just knew he was asleep at the table. She was shot across from him, and there was some animosity between him and my uncle Joe for periods of time because my grandfather essentially wanted to kill him, and my uncle Joe was more like let the police and whatever you want to call it do their thing. That was the way that we were told it. I don't know if my uncle Joe told it a different way. Obviously, every family's going to have their little perspective, but that was the
Yeah.
perspective that we understood of the dynamic that kind of happened. Well, I found out I was eligible for dual Italian citizenship, and I'm trying to collect documents to give to the consulate, to give to the lawyer, to be like, hey, here's everything that I can prove that I should have my citizenship. I ended up getting pinged on ancestry.com through my grandfather for this death certificate, and then I saw Augustina Massari shot 3 times. Like, holy crap, that's her. I
Yeah.
showed it to my dad. He's like, I didn't even know her name. My dad never mentioned her name ever. I had an
Wow.
aunt. Well, he knew I had an aunt who was killed, but my grandfather never mentioned her name. I was like, holy crap, that's her. So it started down this rabbit hole of I am also anti AI to a lot of degrees. Don't hurt me, Terminator overlords in like 10 years when you take over. But
Right.
it really did a great job of newspaper.com of scrubbing the internet for a lot of, and just records as a whole that you can't really get on Google. for
Yeah.
these newspaper articles, and it turns out that my Augustina Massari's death was this giant event in the South Philly community as well as like the state. Like her murder was in Pittsburgh newspapers, it was in other Pennsylvania newspapers. It was a huge event, and
Wow.
it was a really big event in the South Philly Italian American community. What ended up happening was, or synthesizing it, there was a mid 40-year-old man who was renting out a room in my family's house. So my great grandfather, Eduardo, he died when my grandfather was about 2 or 3. So my great grandmother, Felicia, it's Great Depression. She spoke next to no English until the point that she died in like the 70s or 80s. So very little
Hmm.
English, Great Depression. She's got 3 kids she has to feed. She was like she was he was a renter in the house. My assumption or my amateur history, whatever you want to call it, is they needed money and she had to rent a room, so it just happened to be this guy.
Yeah.
He was in the house. At some point, he started to, I guess, impose himself as like the quote unquote man of the house. I'm pretty certain he was probably like manic schizophrenic or manic bipolar. He was in his mid 40s. He doesn't seem to have any family. He wasn't married. There's no mention in any of the murder or the trials of a mother, a father, a cousin, a sister, anyone. So I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure he was just a guy with some mental health issues who hopped from jobs and kind of, just did random things to stay alive. And he was renting out a room in this house. So he tried to impose his will. At some point, he slaps my Aunt Augustina. My grandmother goes, okay, you're out. They kick him out. At some point, I don't know how long after it was this event, they see him again at church. He tries to interact with Augustina. She blows him off. He gives a vague threat, essentially like, I'll leave creps at your door. There'll be creps at your door. I forget the meaning of it, but he leaves this threat. He eventually comes back to their house. He walks in. He tells my Felicia, my great grandmother, hey, I left some documents upstairs. Can you go grab them for me? She goes to get the documents. He pulls out a gun. He shoots Augustina several times in the back. My grandfather is asleep at the table. And this is a part of, a lot of family lore gets over exaggerated or faked or this, that, and the other thing. It's actually the
Sure.
opposite way. They don't go into as many details about like the truth. He really wasn't asleep at the
Yeah.
table. He had been selling newspapers, again, Great Depression, trying to feed the family. I don't know if he went to school or he had stopped, or like, well, I can just assume like he's a 10-year-old kid selling newspapers. He's exhausted. He probably went to school. He had probably a lot of things going on. He grabs a butcher knife and he chases the guy who just shot his sister with a gun out of the house. He tries to catch him. He's not able to catch him. The guy, I think he goes into hiding for like 2 days, but there's essentially like a lynch mob that starts off as like a couple hundred people, and according to newspapers goes up to like 4 or 5, 600 people trying to
Wow.
kill this guy, like murder him for killing Augustina. They actually, once the police caught him, were throwing rocks at the police cars and trying to get in the police vehicle to pull him out to, have some vigilante justice for him killing
Yeah.
Augustina. I don't remember the street, but apparently there was like a big procession on one of the big main Philly streets. I don't think it was Broad Street, but it was one of the more major streets. Again, it went up to newspapers. It was this giant thing that my grandfather never spoke about ever. It was just this
Hmm.
vague history. I even reached out to my Uncle Joe's family, and hey, I found out this information. Did my Uncle Joe ever meant? They're like, no, we just knew he had a sister who died. So the same thing that my grandfather kind of had in our family, my Uncle Joe did the same thing. They didn't want to talk about it. I looked in the
Hmm.
newspaper articles. There's a lot of mentions of my grandfather, like at court, or anytime his sister's murder was brought out, about the excitable Italian boy trying to uh, kill his sister's murderer and being brushed aside by the police, or he's screaming, I'm going to kill you in court out the guy. Like, this is a 10-year-old boy, who watched his sister die, but was still, so whatever you want to call it, to grab a knife to try to kill him. Like, it's something that stuck with him for the rest of his life. So finding
Yeah.
out this information, it made a lot of sense to further integrate history into the story, and that's where the John Wick element came in. And I'm spoiling it a little bit here, but you can watch John Wick and know beforehand, hey, they kill his dog, but that's not the movie. It's like there's an
Yeah.
an 2 more hours that go on from it, but that's the crux. It's kind of the same thing with the Mafia, that I use Augustina's death, at least for this, to integrate into kind of the historical elements of the KKK, a little bit of Easter eggs about my grandfather, and mix that in there as a big part of the story to move it forward. Because it's tough. You're taking all these sporadic things that are different parts of history, and you're trying to weave them into something that's concise, that makes
Yeah.
sense, that's entertaining, but that's also, because it is personal to my family, it's personal, especially personal to my dad and my aunt, of not sensationalizing it. So it made sense to weave these things. And the final part's the mafia part, which my grandfather was not a part of. However, he did know mafia guys growing up in South Philly. Again, talking to my dad, getting the information that I can, that my dad can remember. Because again, you don't think to ask these questions until way after the fact.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
grandfather he saw mafia violence in Philadelphia growing up. He saw the hits, he saw the results of the mafia being the mafia growing up. He knew Frankie Flowers. If you Google Frankie Flowers, he was a bookie for the mafia. He was not a mobster, but he was killed by the mob. Now you can also watch YouTube videos of some people who are still alive who say, "Oh no, he wasn't associated with the mob at all," and whatever. You can take that however you want. The newspapers say he was a bookie for the mob, and that was eventually killed by the mob. Well, my grandfather knew who he was at some intimate level. I don't know, and I haven't figured out. My family had left that area for a while, and they didn't come back until much later in life. My grandfather had been laid off from a job. Frankie offered him a job. My grandfather ended up turning it down because my dad was trying to become a cop, and my grandfather didn't want to like affect his career.
Yeah.
But someone who's a bookie for the mob is not offering anyone a job. He's
Right.
not just going, like, especially in those circles, there was some kind of intimate or close relationship where they knew each other for him to be offered a job. And I don't know what the job was either.
Sure.
I have no, it could have been a truck driver, it could have been whatever, but you're not offering someone a job if you don't have some kind of intimate connection. And the other person is Chicken Man Testa. Chicken Man Testa was one of the mob bosses in Philly at a period. That's a name that my dad said he remembers, but he doesn't know how my grandfather knew him. It could be a lot of things. We all went to high school with people, and it's like, oh, I know that name and I know of them, but I don't
Yep.
actually know them. Was
Yep.
it that? Because, in the South Philly enclaves of Italian American history, like everyone kind of knew each other or knew of each other. Was it one of those? Was it, hey, we went to school together? Did he, because Augustina's death was so big in the city, did they somehow know each other that way? Or was it, again, some kind of intimate relationship where they were boys who grew up in South Philly or knew each other in South Philly, and it was a little closer? Again, I don't know. I can't speculate. It's a name my dad remembers, who my grandfather talked about at some point. He had the nickname Monk, and every time my dad was like, "Hey, when we went to South Philly, all these people would come up and say hi to him." So he was like every other ethnic kind of enclave, like he was known in that area of South Philly. So that's where the mob element kind of came in. And then, like I said,
Hmm.
it was just weaving in a lot of history. It's making things make sense. It's trying to juggle a lot of things, and again, not sensationalize it. It is personal
Yeah.
to my family, as it's personal to me in a different way. I'm a little more removed from the death, where it hits my dad and my aunt a little harder, mostly because of my grandfather and them now understanding why he was and why he did certain things a whole lot more, because now I
Yeah.
have the details of the murder. They can connect some pieces of some stuff that happened, but also it is a love story to my family at the same time, and I want to put their name out there. I want to put Augustina's story out there. I want to, even if it's not directly, I want her name to be known again, because she had her life taken from her. She had everything taken from her as a 16-year-old girl by a 45-year-old man or older, which I'd like to mention. He also said one of the reasons he killed her was because he was in love with her and she was seeing other boys. So there's a whole element of,
Jeez.
I don't want to rabbit hole stuff, but like there's this grown middle aged man who's been in the house probably since she was 7, 8, 9 years old. Was there some other like really dark stuff that might have occurred in that household that also added to the element and the mix? I
Yeah.
don't know. Again, I don't want to over speculate, but those are the kind of places when you're trying to play detective and historian, like looking at your sources and working through them. So that's another element to it. So as far as the history, that's the history. Like I said, it's personal. It's trying not to sensationalize things. Talking real quick, pro wrestling. I see Tarantino as the pro wrestling thing. Like, not that it's bad. I love pro wrestling, but pro wrestling has a cadence to it.
Yeah.
I want to get my pops. I want to get my heat. I have a story. I'm going to sensationalize aspects of a fight because I want to get that wow factor. That's kind of
Yep.
like a Tarantino movie. I compare this to more like MMA. MMA can be boring, it can be exciting, it can be something in between, but it's raw. You don't know what's going to happen, and it's grounded. It's dirty. Conor McGregor, 10 seconds into a fight, slips, boom, blows out his ACL. Like that's not going to happen in a pro wrestling match unless it's like purposely like, hey, we've got this angle and we want someone to get hurt because we're going to get a bigger pop. You could just get hurt 5 seconds into a match in MMA. It's like, holy crap, my career's over. That's
Yeah.
kind of how I compare this story. Is it's grounded, it's raw. You could read this and think it came from a history book, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that comes down to how it's written, right? Of like keeping everything grounded, weaving in the real life details that happen. Like that's only going to breathe more life into this book to where you don't need to have all of these big sensational moments because
Yeah.
you've got the realness of it that are carrying people along and have their interest. Like it's I just think like all of that as someone that those commercials where like you're becoming your parents. I'm becoming my
Yeah.
dad
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
he used to just casually, and my stepdad too, like they just casually watch documentaries or the History
Yeah.
Channel
Yeah.
or Travel Channel or whatever. And if you look at like the shows that I'm now watching more than others, I'm watching a lot of stuff on like the travel and discovery channels. And I'm like, oh, this is what they were talking about. Because
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
just
becoming my parents. Yeah.
yeah, like, I'm just fascinated, and there's so much out there that as a kid, you're like, "Oh, it's all about me, I don't give a shit about anything else," and then
Yeah.
as you
Yeah.
get older, like, now I'm at a point in my life where I need to be aware of what's happening outside of my neighborhood and my house and my
Yeah.
office, and also, like, what came before, and as a comic creator and someone who just has always had it in me to tell stories, like, I don't have to think of every premise out there. Like I can just look at folklore or like tribal stories that have been lost and just bring those back out of history and say, hey, this is still a thing that was very prominent and very important. And similar to you bringing Augustina's story out, like that's a story that matters a great deal for your family. And so to be able to bring that forward and then kind of share that with the Kickstarter and world universe, like I think that's important. Like that's why you tell stories. And I don't think I've ever had like that clear of a like, oh yeah, no, we're just doing it because it's good to tell. Like it matters because those stories matter to the people that lived them and that had the memories and that had the like. We just don't talk about that. Like it, and we had stuff like that in my family where it's like, yeah, we don't ask Grandpa about World War II. Like he won't talk about it. And it wasn't until even like a decade after he passed that we only ever started hearing stories about it. And it was like, God, he was a bad, like he was in the communications department. I have one of the patches he had on his uniform on my jacket because he was in communication. So he was running behind enemy lines, climbing trees to run communication wire so that the, the Americans could get word to the people that were holed up and like spies that were living behind enemy lines anyway. Like he was the one that was running with these giant spools of cable on his back to climb trees and like sleeping in trees because the German forces were right below him on the ground. And like those are stories that it's like, how did you not tell that? That's so badass. But like he
Yeah.
never talked about it with, and like he barely even talked about it with my nana. And she was like, "Oh yeah, I was putting guns on the planes, and like I was part of the Riveters. Like I was one of them." And so she talked a little bit about it. He never did. And like those are the stories that, as you learn them and you hear about them, you're like, man, how the fortitude of our grandparents to be this badass, all like grabbing a butcher knife at 10 to chase somebody that just shot your sister. Like I can never imagine having any sort of anything in me to do that. I'd be like, I don't know, weeping and hiding under the table. Like I don't, I would never think to grab a butcher knife and go after the guy. Like
I
that's
think that's a
insane to
great
me.
point about your grandfather. I've heard so many stories about people from that generation who they find out after the fact
Yep.
that their grandfather did this crazy thing in World War II and it was never spoken about. And it's the
Yeah.
same, like the only reason we even know details about Augustina's story is because of my grandma, not because of my grandfather. He didn't speak about it. And then they get lost, and then you find out, and then you're trying to like sit there and like, if there's people not alive, if there's not newspaper articles, it's like I want to know the full details about this.
Yeah.
I can't find it out. It's like, but this should be known. Like taking that legacy and not letting it lost. I love that you brought up like the old stories or like um fables and lore and stuff that gets
Mhm.
lost. Like it's, I'm kind of in the same boat. I guess it just, as you get older, you just turn in that direction.
Yeah.
I've gone from, I don't read comics really anymore. Although I did get my son, I got him started on Absolute Batman and Moon Knight
Nice. Yeah.
at Polvin. I don't have time for it, but I'm looking next to me. I've got Paradise Lost. I've got Dante's
Oh, jeez.
Inferno. I've got the personal memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant, and then I've got the Silmarillion as like my list of stuff that I want to start reading
Super
because,
light. Yeah.
yeah, super light, because those are the things that I think are going to make me a better storyteller. Is
Mm.
there's so much in history which I started looking at. It's funny that you mentioned that. As I think I was driving in the car today. I'm like, a lot of the stuff that I'm trying to write is either based on real people or real history and turning it into fiction, or trying to, like the supernatural story that I'm basing that I'm writing. It's based, while supernatural lore might be, mystical, whatever you want to call it, it still has a grounding in real life history. I'm just pulling it and trying to pull these characters and retell it in a different way and
Yeah.
not having those stories get lost. I'm trying to further appreciate. In my Amazon card is Journey to the West. It's Homer. It's all these older stories that made a
Mm.
huge mark on all the great storytellers throughout history. I'm like, might not be comic related, but I think it's these stories should be brought on because they're part of our human history, but
Yeah.
also they can make me better because I'm going to understand why they were so important to our culture. Why are they so important to our storytelling? But the thing about your grandfather, I've heard that from other people, the same thing with my own grandfather, and it sucks because you're like, I need to know more about it, and I can't. And
Yeah.
I just have to accept I am never going to know the full details of that kind of impact or the crazy stuff they did. That World War II generation, they truly are like the greatest generation. They did amazing things, and
Yep.
I probably want to say half, 80-90% of it we will never know because they didn't
Yeah.
tell anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. It was because at the time too, like it was just understood that men didn't talk about their
Yeah,
feelings. And so if they were feeling anything from what they were doing, like there were the top drawer, anytime I'd go to my nana and grandpa's house, the top drawer in my grandpa's room was always, it was full of stuff from his life. Like we all had a drawer in the chest of drawers. So like I had a drawer, my sister had a drawer, and we just kept trinkets and toys and random stuff in it. And the top drawer always had stuff that was grandpa's. And so it had like the cards when he was running for like the city mayor. It had, all of his political stuff that he was doing, involvement that he was doing with the church. But then it also had stuff that he brought back with him from Germany. So, like, we had a Nazi flag that he brought back from like when they took buildings from the Nazis and they just took the stuff. Like, this isn't going to stay up. This isn't going to stay here. Like, we're taking it. And whether we destroy it or we wipe our asses with it or whatever, like, it's ours now. And he had a flag, he had an armband that still had like dried blood on it, which is
wow.
insane. Like
Yeah,
it just, in high school when we were learning about World War II and stuff like that, I was like, oh yeah, like I have all of these things. And I didn't want to bring anything in for like a show and tell because I was like, I don't, I felt like, well, my grandpa has this Nazi stuff. He's not a
yeah,
closet Nazi, but like,
yeah,
I don't want to be like, oh yeah, look at this Nazi stuff. Like
yeah.
I just
Reminds
didn't.
me of the It's Always Sunny episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly that. But like he had all of this just insane stuff that he passed in 91. So I was 5. So like there was no, I only knew like, oh, grandpa's the balloon guy at the church festival and he drives the big red van for church and he's heavily involved in the city that they lived in and like pushes me on the swings and does all the stuff. And then as I got into high school and started getting more and more fascinated with my family, it was like, what do you mean he took those off of a dead soldier that like his platoon killed in World
He
War
did.
II. Like what? And it was just like, oh yeah, he mentioned it like one time ever, and like that's why he brought it back, and just insane stuff that you know. Who knows what else he was a part of? Who knows what
Yeah.
other things he did? And that's just that that's the like you said, that's the sad part of like there's no way that I can ever find that out. I have no idea where I would even start to figure that out. And the stories that they lived in Germany are just gone. And so
Yeah.
like bringing life and revitalizing those stories, I just think is like the coolest damn thing. And when we're done, I want to like go just call all my cousins and be like, okay, I need I need to know as many stories as you know about his time in the war, because like what the hell. And hearing my uncle talk about when he was in Vietnam and he was in the Navy, and they would like do flyovers in the Bermuda Triangle, and he was like there was a like a tanker just sitting dead in the water, no seamen on board, there were no anybody. He said we landed, there were three planes, we landed all three planes on the top deck, and we got out and we got maybe a deck below the top, and there still didn't run into anybody. And he said we immediately were like, nope, we're leaving, we're
Gone.
getting out of here.
Gone.
Like just it was just dead in the water, not a soul on board. And he was like, yep, we left, we just got off. And like those were things that he never talked about until I don't know, something happened. Like he lost a close friend, or like something happened significant that
Trigger it.
suddenly he was like, no, my like I have three cousins, and they're all dudes, they're all older. And I think he was like, they need to know these stories. And then I got lucky enough to be in the room for some of them. And it was just like, how in the hell did like my uncle who's sitting right here do all of these insane things during Vietnam? And like it's just all of those things blow my mind as I learn them. And yet it's like, oh, well, of course you did. Like that's what you did, was you went to
Yeah.
Vietnam. And like that's everybody that's our the boomer generation, like they did Vietnam, or have stories about their siblings going to Vietnam. Like my dad did. He wasn't old enough to go. And so by the time he was 18, they were done recruiting everybody, and like all of those. So it's just it's insane to me, and it's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. Like that's just I love hearing all of those things.
I
Um
got lucky that if it wasn't for it being the event that it was and that newspapers covered it, it would have got lost. Like her
yeah,
story would have never known her name, never knew anything if it wasn't for the fact that it was covered by newspapers. And bringing up the mental health thing, my dad, again, this is where like me finding out so much about this made it click. It didn't click for him. He remembered stories about my grandpa or my grandmother calling my grandfather crazy. Now, my
mm,
grandmother was also an Italian American woman, and she was very much a stereotype in a lot of way. So crazy didn't always mean crazy. That could be you reacted to her wrong. Oh, you're crazy. But
yeah,
he was having uh issues in, I don't know if it was the 70s probably ish, somewhere around that time period, where he was actually seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist, because he was having issues. But my dad was like, it finally clicked in my head. He's Italian American male. Mental health is not looked at the way it is now. For it to
yeah,
be that time period, that ethnic background, and the fact that he is seeing someone, he's thinking, how much pain was my dad in? How much in the
yeah,
red, as my dad calls it, in his life, was he seeking help because of this death of his sister? My aunt, one of my aunts, was getting a divorce from her husband. He was having physical night terrors that her husband, who she was divorcing, was going to murder her. My
mm,
cousin, when I talked to him again, because this created like a whole deep dive. Again, I'm playing amateur historian, amateur journalist of like, hey, I've got to get my sources. I've got to get all the information that I can,
yeah,
connect the pieces, because I don't have a lot of the living sources, which is always unfortunate. Like World War II, most of those most of those people are dead, so you can't get that information. Wasn't in a newspaper or chronicled or a journal somewhere, you're
yeah,
not going to. But my grandfather, like my cousin would go out and get like a glass of water when he was sleeping over from the fridge. My grandfather would be sitting there smoking on his couch, just kind of sitting there in the dark. And you just think, oh, he just can't sleep. No, it's because he was a 10-year-old boy. He saw a murder. He saw, mob hits on top of seeing his sister killed in front of him. He was lucky that he was the tail end of World War II, where he was drafted, but he never got sent overseas. I can only imagine
Mm,
how much more would have messed him up if he went overseas. But
yeah.
those kind of elements of taking that, it makes a lot of sense why he had certain personality quirks and reacted certain ways to things because it's long-term PTSD. And
Yeah.
again, that generation didn't talk to anyone about it. Luckily, he wasn't an alcoholic, which you would sometimes get from people from that period, but he
Yeah.
wasn't an alcoholic. He wasn't anything like that. But they didn't talk. They didn't tell anyone anything. I just got very lucky that it happened to be in newspapers, and I've got like 20 or 30 of them, which there will be 10 pages in the Mafia versus the Klan of the history. I'm going to put
Cool.
in clips from the newspaper. I'm going to put in the real story, and eventually, at some point in time, I'd actually like to write like either a nonfiction, almost like a crime narrative. I'm not really sure I want to do it, but I would like to tell Augustina's story as a whole with all
Mm,
the information that I gathered because her murder just as a whole is extremely interesting. Like it was a big event in the 1930s. I think it would be again to kind of give her life in a different way. If
yeah.
anyone's interested, the Italian American Stories podcast did I think it was like about an hour or 40 minutes podcast on the whole history. I got in touch with them. We did the whole research thing as I'm doing research on it for anyone who's interested. But yeah,
That's cool. Man, that's awesome. So what's the I know it's a graphic novel, but like what's the page count of the book? Like what can people
yep.
expect from the book itself?
So the book itself is 110 pages of comic, and then it'll be that back page 10 of like the real history. Um, it's in a black and white noir style because I just felt
Nice.
like that was the perfect way to do this. Like an old timey black and white movie was what fit with it. And
Yeah.
Martin, who is the artist, he's got a perfect mix of like cinematic and gritty. I've got some like preview pages on my Instagram of some of the later stuff. And if you're interested, you go on the Kickstarter page right now. There's a 22 page preview of the first 22 pages. Like it's meant to be like an old time gangster movie. It's meant to be gritty. It's meant to feel raw. And also the final layer I'd say that I add to the script later on was like a theological philosophical element. I really wanted to play into like I built out these characters and I tried to make them human and move into kind of like the personal stuff and the emotional ride and character arcs.
Yeah.
But I felt like there needed to be a deeper crust, and I felt like we finally took this book from like, hey, this is good to its climax, like its peak, was adding in the underlayer of again thinking when I first wrote it, I was like, hey, I'm a dad. If I lost my kids, how would I react?
Yeah.
I want okay, that makes sense. That makes sense from a human element. But how do I morph and twist that with the character, the fictional character of Mario? He never denounces his religion. He never like God real, God's fake. I hate God, this, that, and the other thing. It's more about the fact that as a character, he still acknowledges his faith, like, hey, there's a heaven and hell. But I am so willing to get my revenge on earth. I will go to hell to, avenge and get justice for my
Mm,
daughter. I've lost everything. I am willing to go to this point in the earthly life to essentially give up my next life. It's not like explicitly mentioned, but it's the way that it's weaved into certain phrase or certain sentences and
sure.
dialogue that he's making throughout the book. That there's the philosophical element. There's certain shading that I had Martin do as far as like light and dark as he's crossing certain thresholds. It's like you're moving into the dark. You're making deals with the devil. There's adding again because it is a not that it's Protestant versus Catholic, but to get that kind of like gangs in New York, um, we'll call it background aesthetic.
Mm,
Hey, the Protestants say this, the Catholics say this. How can I then take that as like a crux where they're fighting each other from different points? And like I said, trying to weave in those deeper things. And I think the biggest one is making a deal with the devil. How willing are you to make a deal with the devil to get what it is that you want? And are you willing to essentially go to the depths of hell to get that justice? That this person was pushed to that point. So that was something that I think pushed the book to that extra level. And then it gets
yeah.
added in, like I said, back to the artwork. There's certain ways that shadows or characters are again crossing threshold that they're making choices or they're sitting there trying to fit that artwork and everything into the Kickstarter. So yeah, that was a whole roundabout way. 110 pages. This is the important part why the Kickstarter matters. It's a
That's sweet.
one of a kind print cover. The way that the the publishing with SourcePoint works is, and I think it's a great model, and I think every indie publisher should go to, and I don't know why others don't. You essentially make the book, they send it out. They're the one who puts it in stores, Amazon, Barnes and
Mm,
Noble, whatever. The Kickstarter is me, that they don't take any money for, me essentially recouping my costs. I'm making the book, I'm doing my print run, I'm doing whatever. I'm making those costs back via the Kickstarter. But what's going to make it unique from what you can buy, via Amazon in a couple months later? The one of a kind, one time print cover that you'll never see again. So if you pledge to the Kickstarter, you'll only get this cover. It will not be the same as the one moving forward, and that will be in print, and that will be available globally when SourcePoint does their print run, and their publishing. It's by King Klaus. I've known Klaus for a while. He's done Images Void Trip, and a bunch of other comics as well. Again, talking about networking. I met him way back at a Philly Comic Con, kept in contact with him, loved his style, and now, he's my buddy I text all the time. I'm still waiting for when I can get my book with him. The timing has to rewrite. I have the idea. It's just a matter of timing now. But he did our cover for the first Six Swords Kickstarter, one time print run again. He's doing another one time print run. So Klaus killed it with the cover, but you'll never get it if you don't pledge this Kickstarter. So that's going to make it unique with that 110 page count.
that's dope. I do love that idea of having the Kickstarter exclusive cover.
Yep.
Like, hey, because you brought this thing to life and you made it happen, you're getting an exclusive that no one else is going to be able to
Yep.
have unless
Collector's
they were
item.
here with you. Like that's peak, dude. I don't have any other notes. We covered everything, but I do have two more things that I want to do. The first
Yeah.
is I'm going to take a screenshot and use that as the YouTube thumbnail. I don't have a Mafia hat, so I wasn't able to
Oh, I
wear
should have wear
that.
my shirt. I got a shirt made with a QR code. I don't even know where it's at right now.
All right, we can pose here, and we will go in 3, 2, 1. Great. Let me make sure those took perfect. Yeah, they did. So the other thing that I always like doing, and I should have warned you about this, but I didn't. So surprise. I sorry about that. I love doing this show because of all of the different backgrounds and experiences that people bring, and also leaning into the similarity that we all love telling stories and making comic books. So to lean into the fact that every voice that comes on is different. I always like to end every stream by just shutting up, and I turn the mic over to whatever creator or creative team that I have on the show to say, hey, if there's anything you want people to hear specifically from you in your voice, it could be a sales pitch for the Kickstarter, which is linked in the episode description, as well as your Instagram and Substack. So it'll be super easy for people to find you that way. It could be a sales pitch like, hey, this Kickstarter is coming, and all the things, or it could be something completely different. The content doesn't matter at all to me. It's an open forum, so whatever you have for the people see, this is the time to share it. So take it away.
Yeah, unfortunately, as much as I would like to give, the answers to the world and life, it is 100%. I got to focus on the Kickstarter. Um, I was given the opportunity by Dirk and Josh. Again, the first pitch that I gave to SourcePoint was rejected. I've had my face, smashed a few times from those learning experiences, and the fact that I was given this opportunity, I am going to take that and not run with it. I'm going to sprint with it and go above and beyond. And part of that is making sure this book funds, it gets out there. It saves me a whole lot of money and makes my life a whole lot easier as far as bringing this to life. So not only do you get the collector's cover and all that cool stuff and the pledges and the stretch goals and all that fun stuff that we get to do as far as the Kickstarter, it helps me as a creator, get to that next level, get my book out there, get my work out there, because I already do, like I said, I have a book signed with SourcePoint next that I like to work on. And the only way that I'm going to be able to continue to make stuff is if this kind of stuff is successful. And it can't be successful without you, the listener, the reader, whoever. So if the Mafia versus the Klan as a title does not get you excited, I can't do anything for you. I'm sorry, but it should, because there's no reason on earth that that title alone does not get you pumped, does not get
Yeah.
you amped, and does not get you interested. It's John Wick meets The Godfather. Again, it's the 22 pages. That's on the Kickstarter. If that does not get you excited for the rest of what happens, I mean, it gets raw, it gets dirty. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a story about human pain, human. I don't want to say grit, but like what happens when everything things taken away from you? How do you react when you have nowhere else to turn? Would you be willing to make a deal with the devil? Would you be knowingly willing to quote unquote turn to the dark side? Anakin Skywalker it, knowing what that's going to entail, and be stuck with those choices, stuck with those moral choices after. I think as a book, it's the art's fantastic. Martin killed it. He killed it so much that I was going to do a one-time book for this. Like it was going to be, hey, one and done. I have
Mm.
to do a second, and also it works out because I kind of want to give the Mario character a full circle moment to go into some of those philosophical, theological elements. Not that it's going to be a happy ending, but it makes sense for the character arc for there to be a second conclusion to the book. But again, the Mafia vs. Klan is on Kickstarter. We already have 52 followers, which means we reached our first follower backer day goal of 50. We're trying to go to 100. I want to push to 100 before we actually launch. It boosts our success. But again, collector's
Yep.
cover by King Klaus, amazing artist, one-time print run. That collector's item will be exclusive to you for the Kickstarter. It'll never, ever, ever, ever be printed again. I won't even print it and sell them at conventions. Literally, whoever backs and gets this, those are the only print runs being done. If you like, revenge tales, if you like human tales, John Wick meets The Godfather based on real history. Again, that's very personal to my family, very personal events in my life, and people that I know, which makes it that much heavier and that much more important. Again, I can't thank Dirk and Josh enough for the opportunity to tell this story, to get it out into the world. And I want to make sure I can do everything to pay them back and give this book the success that I feel like it not deserves, but for the artist, Martin, for the editor, Drina, for the letterer, Dave, and again, for the publishers themselves to have faith in me, and to put their energy and their time into something that I created. I want to thank them, and by thanking them, part of that success.
Sweet. Yeah, man. You had me at the title.
That's what I hope. I
I
hope the
immediately
title
was
does
like,
it.
that sounds dope.
Yeah.
So I look forward to it. I'm sure that the day one launch will be a wild ride for you. I hope to
As
jump on
Kickstarters
board
are.
early. Yeah, dude. Every time I'm looking at what am I looking at? I'm at 16 hours left on mine, and I'm just
Oh, you
like,
guys send it to me.
can we be done? Like, I'm just ready to end it so that we can stop the constant cycle of the online all the time posting about it and telling everybody I can about it,
Yeah.
because that's the hustle. Like that's part of the
That's
hustle.
the
So
hustle. That's the grind. You got to do it.
yep. See, dude, thanks for hanging out with me. This was I really enjoyed this. Turns out I love hearing about history, and
Yeah.
that's okay. I'll learn it. I like hearing about history stuff. So there's that. For anybody listening, if you enjoy history, or if you know a history buff yourself, why don't you share this episode with them and go ahead and subscribe and like and do all the YouTubey things. And definitely click the link that's in the episode description, whether you're watching or listening. It'll have the link to the Kickstarter for the Mafia versus the Klan. And you want to be on day one so that it has the strongest launch that it possibly can. Reduce as much stress as we can for C, and let's fund it
Please.
early so that he doesn't have to refresh
Please.
every 30 seconds. Not that I've done that, but I've done that.
Oh, no.
So what's a good podcast without a good tagline? Hang tight, I got logistics for you. See, go do what's good for you and make some art, because I want to see it. And we are out of here.